The North Pacific is pulsing. Is there hope long term? I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, October 19th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have a comment or question, write it up down below. We'd be happy to respond. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may. Hit the super thanks button down below. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Craig8638, Tim Caston, Coach Nate, Clay Goose, The Bradison, and Evolution Moto. Most of these folks are longtime contributors, and even for the new ones, we appreciate it very much. And with that, let's get to work. We'll start by looking at significant wave heights around the planet, starting in the North Pacific, where we have one gale pushing off the Equatorial Islands with 17-foot seas, a much stronger storm pushing through the northwestern Gulf of Alaska with 49-foot seas, and another gale with 24-foot seas off the Pacific Northwest. All three of these either have or are scheduled to produce swell, and all that mainly on a rather northerly course. That's part of the theme here. It's the very northern part of the Pacific that's active, not down further to the south, which really focuses swells more on the Pacific Northwest and much less on Hawaii, and certainly nothing down into Central and Southern America, unfortunately. All right, in the South Pacific, we have a little gale with 26-foot seas here in the Central South Pacific, but I believe that's falling south. Another system south of New Zealand with 28, 29-foot seas. I'm sorry, did I say Tasmania? That's what I meant. I said New Zealand. Tasmania, probably pushing some swell up through the Tasman Sea Channel, but there is some hope for the southern hemi longer term. North Atlantic, gale producing 18 to 20-foot seas well off the U.S., northeast U.S. coast. Most of that energy now pushing off to the east. Another little weather system fading off of Ireland, UK area. In the South Atlantic, a gale with 24, 25-foot seas, but I think that's all aimed off to the south, so of no real interest. And the Indian Ocean, fairly quiet, as would be expected for the time of year. But first, let's take a look at current conditions. We're going to look at the buoys. We're going to start up in the Pacific Northwest. Grays Harbor buoy, number 036, there off the border between Oregon and Washington. We're looking at all the energy hitting that buoy all the way up from 33.3 second period energy, which, yes, there is some, 0.3 of a foot. But you see there is a big bolus of energy somewhere in the 18 to 15 to 14 second period range. And the chart ends down here at 5 second period. This would be basically unrideable wind chop. Okay, but the buoys actually read down to like 1 or 2 seconds, something like that. But right there, that's the focus. Let's see how the algorithm does at teasing out what actual swell is going on here. Primary swell, 9.9 feet at 16.9 seconds from 272 degrees. That is surf of 16.7 feet. That's pretty solid indeed. And then we have secondary swell, 11.6 feet at 13.5 seconds from 274 degrees. Pretty much a mixture of all this energy is the same swell. It's just long period, short period stuff. And as you can see, there's even bunches of wind swell. It's all pretty much a convoluted mess. But there is energy as it moves further away from the fetch area, i.e. down towards California. The swell will groom itself out. The longer period elements, of course, will race forward and arrive first, and then the shorter period elements arriving sometime beyond that. Down to Northern California, we would love to say we're using the Point Reyes buoy number 029, but it went down about a day and a half ago, 2 days ago. I'm hoping that it's just a data anomaly and that through some magic, CDIP will go clear out some files and it'll all start working again. But if it's down, we're kind of in deep trouble because buoy 46013 is down. and there really is no good buoy left, and a bunch of the outer buoys are all down, so there really will be, or could be, no real buoy data left for anywhere in Northern California other than Monterey Bay. Anyway, so we're going to use buoy 142, the San Francisco bar buoy. This one tends to read smaller than is what is typically occurring. But you see here, swell, big a batch of energy in the 14-second period range. Let's see how the algorithm does here. 4.4 feet at 13.6 seconds from 281 degrees. Surf height, 6 foot. Now that 281 degrees, the swell is actually much more north. This is, I believe this buoy is actually inside the Farallon swell shadow. It's really a shipping buoy. As a result, the swell is twisted. It's sort of like Southern California. It comes in more out of the west once it goes over the past the Farallon Islands and the Outer Banks out there. Anyway, and of course it reduces in size. All right, secondary swell 2.4 feet at 10.5 seconds, again from the west, making surf about 2.5 feet. Down to Southern California, the Point Loma South Buoy, 191. They're off of San Diego. A much more muted swell profile. All this energy. Let's see, there was swell that hit Northern California on Saturday. Today, on Sunday, you saw on the last buoy, that energy is down quite a bit. I mean, there was double overhead surf at top spots yesterday. That's down a bit. Southern California is getting the swell, but given the 310-degree north direction, most of it's shadowed by Point Conception. So instead, it's almost like background southern hemi swell coming in. You see a bit of energy here at 15.4 seconds. And a little bit of other longer period energy out there. Let's see how we do here. Primary swell, 1.9 feet, 15.1 seconds from 242 degrees. Okay, so that's not really it. The algorithm gets confused. It mixes southern hemi background swell angle with northern hemi swell, and it just sort of picks something somewhere in between. Same thing with this 12-second period energy, 1.3 feet at 12 seconds, 1.5 feet, 3 foot. There were waves at top spots in Southern California today that were head high, maybe even a hair bit more, and you know where that top spot is. Most other places, a bit more moderate, head high kind of thing. Now over to the Waimea Bay Buoy, north shore of Oahu. Oahu was blessed with getting a whole batch of swell from the Kuril Islands aimed directly at them, where California sat high and dry and basically got nothing. Now the tables are reversed. The storm track is developing like from the Dateline and the northwestern Gulf, pushing into the northern Gulf of Alaska. Most of this energy all bypasses Hawaii and takes aim on Pacific Northwest down into Northern California. Anyway, Waimea Bay Buoy, you see a much more muted profile here, as well as residual swell is slowly fading out. Primary swell 3.6 feet at 8.6 seconds from 134 degrees. Okay, that seems a little weird. 3 foot surf, and then secondary swell 2 feet at 11.7 seconds from 320 degrees, 2.3 feet. And there were still shoulder to maybe head high sets this morning on the North Shore, but I think that is steadily dropping off. All right, so what's been going on in the past week in the North Pacific? So we're back to Sunday, the 12th of October. A little gale faded off the Kuril Islands with 22-foot seas. This was the last of the energy. You see the swell front here marching towards the Hawaiian Islands. This is the last of the real energy relative to Hawaii. It hit, I think, somewhere on Tuesday, something like that. Tropical system pushed off to the east. Not a whole lot happened with that. And then here came the first of the gales targeting the Pacific Northwest. This would be Tuesday night, the 14th of October. 31.5-foot seas, the highest seas over this entire domain. It formed, well, there's Hawaii there, but you see all the energy pushing off to the east, maybe sideband background energy. Anyway, Wednesday, there we go, peak seas, 32.6 feet. Now this swell, like I said before, you can see the swell front hit California on Saturday. You can see it moving there. Next gale set up on Saturday in the Gulf of Alaska with 30 feet. I think we got 31.9 feet. That was 18Z on Saturday. So while swell was hitting California, another swell was building behind that. This is the swell that's currently hitting the Pacific Northwest. In fact, you'll see it right there on Sunday, hitting the Pacific Northwest, working its way down to California, while at the same time, here we go, we'll just go back a frame or two, another gale developed on the North Dateline region, pushing into the northwestern Gulf with seas 49 feet aimed off to the east. That's pretty high. That's capable of generating, theoretically, a 25-second period swell. We'll see what really happens. The models aren't suggesting any meaningful 25-second swell energy, but I think that might be a bit in air. And that's our current frame as of right now. To the South Pacific, here we are a week ago, Sunday, 12th of October. We'll put this in motion. You can already see the ice down here starting to decay as spring, if not quite summer yet, starts to build into the southern hemi and the swell pattern weekends. We're into Friday, Saturday, little gale that's falling southeast, I believe. Yes, you can see it there. Probably nothing expected from that. And there's current time. So nothing in the southern hemi for the past week. For the North Atlantic, we had a good low-pressure system off of Cape Hatteras generating, this is typical like your autumn time, northeaster with 18 to barely 20-foot seas. This was on Sunday a week ago. Building, or at least circulating, continuing to produce some sort of fetch, pushing into most of the East Coast. Tropical system developed in the deep South Main development region, but it quickly got caught by a trough and pushed off to the north. Then things sort of settled down, but then a secondary low-pressure system built on Friday off of Cape Cod, again with 20-foot seas, building to 25. Did it get any higher than that? Right about 26-foot seas. Sideband energy from this pushed into, I think, Florida. It was on late Saturday into early Sunday sort of thing. And now that low circulating, pushing off to the east and bound for Europe. Nothing after that. Down to the South Atlantic, put this into motion, see what we have here. Anything, nothing yet. There we go. On Wednesday into Thursday, local gale energy, I guess you'd call it, 2022, 24-foot seas, impacting South Africa. Another system developed with 34-foot seas, pushing off to the east. Swell from that, you see it right there, has just hit the South African coast early on Sunday and is probably fading from there. And then the Indian Ocean, we'll put this into motion. This is all past. We're into Tuesday, Wednesday. See if anything meaningful. A little bit of a gale tried to develop south of Madagascar on Friday with like 26-foot seas. Another weak little system off of Perth generating 22-foot seas. But here we are into Sunday, and all in all, not a whole lot happening, not unexpected, as we move from the southern hemi starting to go to sleep as summer sets in there, the northern oceans, and in particular the North Pacific, appearing to look much more active, thank goodness. So then we go looking at the forecast. We're going to deep dive into the North Pacific. We're going to start by looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gale development. And when those gales form, the jet stream helps direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a push in the jet to the south. You see it right there, plain as day. That creates an eddy flow, a counterclockwise circulation aloft. That manifests itself down at the ocean surfaces as well, and that is the identifier or hallmark of low pressure. Of course, low pressure, if it is deep enough, starts generating winds around it. Those winds get traction and impart energy to the ocean surface, creating seas. Those seas, as they radiate out away from the fetch area, the lesser period elements decay off, exposing longer period swell, and swell when it hits your beach like Hawaii there or California there creates surf. The longer period, for the most part, the better, but you need strong winds to do that. So we have a good trough here over the northwestern Gulf. You can see Alaska here. Those are the Aleutian Islands there, Kamchatka, Kurils. California down here, there's San Francisco and Baja. We also have another trough pushing over the Pacific Northwest. That was this morning. I got a firsthand report, heavy rain into the Oregon area, and definitely it was turning into wintertime there, wherein Here in Northern California, sunny, beautiful. Couldn't ask for a nicer day. Also notice a cutoff trough here off of Baja. I don't know that that's supporting meaningful low pressure, but if nothing else, it's keeping high pressure at bay and keeping a lighter wind regime likely for the California coast. The Jetstream, if you look at it overall, consolidated, singular, pushing west to east on about the 45 north latitude line with winds 150, 160 knots in pockets. So a pretty good Jetstream setup. As we move into Monday, the trough that was here in the northwest goes off to the northern Gulf. The trough that was over the Pacific Northwest moves inland, but notice winds building to 100 and 200 knots over the date line. That sets up the next gale. And sure enough, there's the beginnings of a gentle trough as we get into Monday night, Tuesday. There's your next trough, Tuesday into Wednesday in the Gulf of Alaska with 180 knot winds over a broad area behind that, setting up more momentum, additional troughing with winds building to 190 knots. So we get into Thursday, setting up potential for more gale development. That trough pushing into the Pacific Northwest on Saturday. Now notice a little bit weaker wind regime setting up behind that. We're into Sunday a week out, but winds then build to 190 knots. Do we got? Nope, we were right at the end of it there with a potential trough. But when you see these troughs with no winds down here in the core of the trough, typically they're not super productive. So a ridging pattern a week out with maybe something that's going to be a trough. My guess is something will develop in here. The models just haven't picked up on it yet. So then we go down to surface level pressure and surface level winds, surface analysis, if you will. High pressure, 1028 millibars. Weekly holding here somewhere north of Hawaii, but notice a light pressure regime off of California. First trough with 30 knot winds pushing into the Pacific Northwest this morning. But here was our main system, 55. I think there was even 60 knot winds in this gale or this storm. Anything more than 50 knots is considered a storm. Another system off of Kamchatka developing with 45 knot winds. So 1, 2, 3 systems as of this morning. So we get into Monday, the strongest one weakening 40 knot winds over the Gulf of Alaska, but the new one developing 45 knot winds over the North Dateline region, pushing into the Pacific or the northwestern Gulf with 40 knot winds on Tuesday, and then into the Gulf of Alaska proper with 30 to 35 knot winds early Wednesday. Yet another system sets up on the North Dateline region with 40 knot winds. Notice this falling more to the south. The 45 north line here is kind of the key thing I'm always looking at. If it's north of 45, pretty shadowed, pretty far to the north. Once it gets south of 45, that opens up the potential, at least, tangentially for Southern California and certainly all of Central California. And just by virtue of it being for the south, opens up Hawaii's swell window a little bit more, though this is almost due north of Hawaii. You see the system falling south. There's the 45 north line right there, north latitude line. So 30 to 35 knot northwest winds into Thursday, Friday, then things sort of settle down. You see low pressure, but nothing super organized. We're into where Saturday, Sunday, we're at 180 hours. Then you see more low pressure trying to set up here, but nothing really congealing well in the Gulf of Alaska. What is the effect of those winds on the ocean surface? Well, not unexpectedly, we have a storm with 49-foot seas here in the northwestern Gulf of Alaska. Most energy aimed off to the east, Hawaii down here. You can watch sort of where the seas go. At best, it'll be just some very minimal sideband swell since it's like 60, 70 degrees off axis from the storm. This system, the swell front, pushing into Oregon and working its way as we go into the motion here. You can see it pushing down towards San Francisco and then eventually into the Point Conception area. We're into Sunday night, 45-foot seas, fading to like 37 feet on Monday morning. New gale forms with 34-foot seas, or 33-foot seas, I think that is. And then we go to 35 feet to 35 feet. That's about it. I'm trying to fall further south, but again, the 45 north line right there. Just can't get south of there. Next one sets up on Wednesday. Now it makes a more traditional southeastward track. There's the 45 north line. We see 20, 22, 24-foot seas on Thursday, pushing into at least this area and maybe even Hawaii, getting a little bit of sideband energy. That all fades out as we get into Friday and Saturday. And then a slacker pattern, but we know something's supposed to be developing here and up here. You see 20-foot seas, and that's why I say the expectation is likely we'll get some seas out of that, some more swell. Now, the models are teasing at least of maybe a little bit of something for the South Pacific. We get into Tuesday morning, 21st of October, a gale with 33-foot seas pushing under the tip here of New Zealand. Not forecast to push northeast, but to track due east across the South Pacific. We're into Wednesday, Thursday. Secondary energy forms with 32-foot seas, building to 35 feet to 38 feet to 39.9 feet on Friday. Now, again, all aim due off to the east. It's pretty good reach to get swell up into Southern California, but I would say it's possible sideband swell energy could result from this system if it forms as forecast, if it's as strong as projected, and it's still like 5 or 6 days out. But if it does, my guess would be that would be the last hope for California Southern Hemi swell of any meaningful size. To the North Atlantic on Sunday, the 19th of October. Here we go, 19-foot seas pushing off. Oh, it does say 20.7 feet. I see a little bit of tan underneath the controls here, but that quickly fades out. I'm looking for really the U.S. coast, but certainly we'll keep our eyes on anything targeting Europe in that area. Generalized seas here at 20 feet pushing up into the Bay of Biscay. That would make surfer exposed breaks in the UK down here and up in this area for sure. Sort of like 12-second. And there we go. Look at this. Some more fetch sweeping into that area. Now, here's the interesting thing. And we probably should talk about this. Theoretically, on Friday, tropical low pressure builds south of Haiti, and it pushes north over the island, and we're up into Sunday, and it looks like it's going to go north from there. You see, we'll go 1 or 2 more frames. You see 24-foot seas exposed almost north of the southern Bahamas, with secondary energy here already pushing up into the southeast coast. So this would be something to keep your eyes on. A late season, like a Halloween style tropical swell. Something to keep your eyes on. Not guaranteed, but interesting nonetheless. For the South Atlantic, we'll see what we have here. A little gale, 30-foot seas, pushed south of South Africa on Monday. That's good for sideband swell. Another little system trying to follow on its track, but just can't get its act together. We're into Thursday. Now Friday, the 24th of October. Saturday, generalized 16, 17-foot seas sweeping over the Jeffreys Bay area. Now, here we go. 180 hours out, 30-foot seas off here. Do I believe it? No, but I guess it's something to look for. Yeah, at this point, it's take anything you can get if you're in the South Africa swell window. And then to the Indian Ocean, we're out at Sunday, the 19th of October today. Put this into motion. Let's see if there's really anything that develops. We're chugging along here. We're into Thursday, Friday. There we go. Saturday. Little area of 31.5-foot seas, winds 49 knots, but it's almost falling southeast. Sideband swell, you see a swell front here, so something would be tracking up into this area, but it's a long ways out, and look at that, really falling south. I don't know. We'll have to see on that. Local wind forecasts for California here and Hawaii here. Surface level pressure, surface level winds, 1028 millibar high in the southern Gulf of Alaska, producing trades 15 knots pushing over the Hawaiian Islands. This is on Sunday, and a generalized light northwest flow, 5 knots near shore for This would be Southern California here. Central California is really getting the northwest winds, and Northern California, San Francisco there, north of there, 10, maybe even 15 knots over outer waters. As we get into Monday, a pressure gradient sets up, high pressure ridging into the coast a little bit. That'll clear out things for the Oregon area. Tightens up the isobars, weaker low pressure inland, 20 to 25 to almost 30 knot northwest winds off of Cape Mendocino, but a light wind regime theoretically down the from pretty much Point Arena southward down to Point Conception, at least early. So we get into Tuesday, that completely fades, and you get, in fact, low pressure here, cutoff low probably, weak south winds, 5 knots for North and Central California. Wednesday, more of the same, south winds, maybe even 10 knots in Central California. You see there's a dividing line. It's right here on the Oregon-California border. All the weather north of there, nothing south, at least for the immediate future. Here comes that more southward position low. You see the fetch literally off of Cape, just about off of Cape Mendocino in Oregon. Northwest winds 10 knots, trade still 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Into Thursday, let's go to Friday. Now here comes a cold front with south winds for Cape Mendocino. Trades picking up as high pressure builds, 15 to 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. A modest northwest flow, 10 knots or so down into Central California. Saturday, the front blows through or fades really somewhere around, I think it's Monterey Bay. We'll check it out when we get into the rain forecast here in a second. But high pressure builds a little bit. Northwest winds 10 to 15 knots. Trade solid for 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Then a week out on Sunday, where are we? You see, let's see, actually, does that... Oh, there's low pressure there that quickly builds, sweeping up into Oregon a week from now or Saturday night with a front off of Northern California pushing into the coast. On Sunday, trades 15, 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Looks like kind of a blowout coming for California. Actually, not as bad as one would expect, and another small low pressure off the coast. Seems like, at least for right now, California is being somewhat protected from what normally would expect would be a strong high pressure given the La Nina situation. And then the precipitation forecast. Here we are, 18Z Sunday. Showers over Northern California. You see the rain for Oregon, snow in the higher elevations of the Cascades. So we get into Monday, that all sort of clears up. No rain forecast. We're really just looking at California, which is right here. Southern California, Central California. Right under the tag there is San Francisco, and I'll call this Northern California up here. Nothing on Tuesday, nothing on Wednesday. We're into Thursday. You see fronts now. Here we go. A meaningful front looking to set up, pushing into Cape Mendocino Friday morning, working itself down to Point Arena in the late afternoon to the Golden Gate Bridge, Half Moon Bay, maybe even down to Santa Cruz Friday night. That would be the 24th of October. And then pretty much fading out over Monterey Bay Saturday morning. Snow for the highest elevations of Lake Tahoe, but no further south, and that all disappears. Another low pressure system, you see it pushing into the coast with rain working its way down the coast on Sunday, do I believe it? And look at that, the whole way down to San Francisco and not making it any further. So the dividing line trying to push south, but still really somewhere up here around the Oregon-California border, and the next system queued up off the coast, if you believe a model, a week out. The temperature forecast for the intersection of the Pacific Crest Trail and Tioga Pass Road in Yosemite. So this is like basically over the High Sierra. Where the trails actually cross is 8,700 feet. So I'm going to tell you a little story here. We upgraded all the servers over the past week. We actually put more memory in all the servers. That was all good. Of course, there were problems with a bunch of the scripts that ran. Certain things in the new version of the OS didn't work as expected, and we had to go deal with all that. So the last remaining issue is this chart right here. It takes piles of data because it has to read data from NOAA for all these elevations across 10 days out, and there's data caps on how much you can download at any one time. So this chart has had difficulty running like every 6 hours like it should. It used to work. I've sent an email to NOAA. They've been fortunately kind enough to reply, and they say tomorrow they'll start working with me on it. We can try to figure out why this isn't working, whether I'm just pulling too much data, and I got a strategy for that. I'll just lop off a couple days off the end, or whether there's something going on in the server or who knows what. Anyway, that's the long story. Short of this is temperatures. No big cold spell forecast, and this is data as of Sunday morning. You see down to barely 32 degrees on, when is that? Midday Wednesday. Another touch of near freezing temperatures Saturday and Sunday. But no wholesale anything here screaming cold air in the Sierra. Temperatures, what was that, 45, 50 degrees kind of thing. Maybe 40 degrees right in there and then back. So no clear signs of like this is pretty typical fall kind of pattern, cold warming up sort of deal. So no clear signs of a legit winter pattern yet. The snow forecast dashboard for Olympic Valley. Sorry, it's not Palisades Tahoe. This is another little thing I learned. Palisades Tahoe is both Alpine Meadows and what was formerly Squaw Valley. They now call the Squaw Valley side Olympic Valley, which I'm fine with that. That sounds good. And so this chart is literally plugged right at the top of the Palisades, as high as you can get. So it's showing, like 3 inches of snow out there on the 25th and the 26th. That's that little brush of a storm that might put a dusting on the highest peaks. Otherwise, not a lot of snow. At one point, the models were showing this thing was going to produce up to 4 feet of snow. That would have been insane for the time of year. But again, as you get closer and closer, reality sets in. And now we're down to a couple inches. Well, guess we'll see how this works out. This chart is the exact same as the previous chart, but this one is keyed on Olympic Valley. The base of Olympic Valley here at 6,000 feet. The summit of the Palisades up at 9,000 feet. You see your little dips, the blue. Oh, actually the white. Where the white and the gray interface is the 32-degree freeze line. So the gray would be slush. Rain would be red if there were precipitation. Blue would be like 28 degrees or below. What do I have? Yeah, 28 degrees or below. That's what you get, like really, starting to really good snow. You see, yes, a little dip of the freeze line falling down for those 2 periods there that we talked about before. And after that, things warm up again with freeze level up above 14,000 feet here in the next few days and at the end of the model run. Wind doesn't even really matter. Not enough snow to ski on, so we're not going to get into it now. All right, so surf spot forecast. Starting up in the border of Oregon and Washington. Surf heights up to 20 feet. That's at like 5 o'clock today, Sunday. You see that swell fading out. But that we'll be looking for that into Northern California. Next swell pulls in on Tuesday, 20 feet again. That fades down. Next swell pulls in at Thursday at 16 to 17 feet. Then slowly fading Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but still 10 feet a week from now. So it's a whole week of surf. Of course, you see, west winds 22 knots Sunday. Looking for the highlights here. South winds 30 knots on Thursday, and then this more west to southerly wind regime after that. Swell heights 13 feet 15 seconds. Next one 11 feet 18 seconds. Or even almost 19 seconds. That from that storm with 49-foot seas. And then 12 feet at 13 seconds, 10 feet at 13 seconds. That's more locally generated type swell. To Ocean Beach, San Francisco. All right, Monday morning, here you go. 12-foot surf, that starts dropping down. Another bout of swell on Wednesday. So let's see, it's Monday. Wednesday, 11-foot surf. Friday, 10-foot, 9-foot, up to 11 to 12 feet into Saturday, and still hanging in the 10-foot range. What do you got for winds? North winds, 10 knots on Monday. Now, this is off the coast a little bit. It's not right on the coast. South winds as we get into Wednesday, and then into Friday. Not a horribly bad wind regime there on Friday, but Saturday looks like northwest winds and blowing pretty good after that. Swell sizes 8 feet at 14 seconds on Monday, 6.8 at 16 feet on Wednesday, another 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 feet at 13 seconds through the weekend. Down to Southern California, unfortunately, because of the rather extreme north angle on these swells, you see surf heights in the 1 to 1.5 foot range or even less beyond that. Wind's nice. Swell heights 1 foot at 13 seconds, 0.9 feet at 14 seconds, 0.9 feet at 14 seconds. So not a whole lot going on there. And the North Shore of Oahu pretty much cut off from the bulk of the energy, at least for the first couple of systems. 4-foot surf on Monday, Tuesday, 3 feet. Then Thursday, the gale pushes a little bit further south, maybe 8-foot surf. And then a little bit more of a push on Saturday to 9 feet. Trades you see just steady, 19 to 20 knots. On the North Shore of Oahu, it certainly will be less than that. Let's go to look at swell heights, 3 feet at 12 seconds. We get into Tuesday, 2.5 at 12. Then we get into Thursday, 5 feet at 15. That's much better. 6 feet at 14 into Saturday. So not all that bad. Couple of days of not so active pattern, and then by midweek, things start looking better. And one last stop on the trip, and I can honestly say finally the California area in Hawaii is doing better than Bali after what seems like a long summer. Surf heights in the 6 foot, still 6 feet, dropping to 3 feet, 5 feet. You see the steady downward trend, light wind regime, swell heights, 5 feet at 12 seconds, 5 feet at 12 seconds, 3 feet at 14 to 15 seconds. So again, sort of putting a fork in the fact that the North oceans are awakening as the Southern oceans are getting ready to go to sleep. So let's go take a look long-term. The long-term outlook. We are going to examine the two major weather oscillations that affect our weather and potential for surf and rain over the long term. They are the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We'll first start with the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There are two phases to it, the active phase and the inactive phase. They both rotate around the planet, one on one side, one on the other, on the equator, moving west to east. Active phase on one side of the planet, inactive phase on the other, rotating around the planet west to east. The active phase is our friend. It is like a low-pressure system. It takes warm, moist air at the ocean surface on the equator, lifts it high up into the atmosphere. The jet stream catches that energy. It energizes the jet stream, making it stronger. A more energetic jet stream is consolidated, better equipped to dig out troughs, and of course troughs generate storms which make surf and snow. The inactive phase, exact opposite. It is falling dry air that hits down the equator. It cuts off the flow of energy to the jet stream. The jet stream gets weak and splits and is not very effective at producing gales and storms. The active phase of the low pressure of the MJO, because it is a low pressure system and trades are generated by high pressure, the active phase of the MJO, that low pressure interacts with the trade winds, making them weaker. Okay, that's a good thing. Conversely, the inactive phase of the MJO, it being like a high pressure system, it syncs up with existing high pressure in the oceans that produce trades, and it amplifies trade winds. So we can look at this data from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator. There's the equator. This is the West Pacific, East Pacific here. That's New Guinea there, the date line right there. We're just looking at the arrows. The longer the arrows, the stronger the winds, and one can roughly equate that with trade winds. So we go, trade winds look pretty strong here in the East Pacific, pretty strong here in the Central Pacific, maybe not as strong in the Western Pacific, but it's not the actual speed that matters. It's the difference from normal for this time of year. They call that anomalies. So you can just look here and look at the arrows. Well, what are they doing? They're not going east or west, and trades either blow east or west. North or south doesn't matter. So trades pretty much normal here. Same thing over, this would be the East Pacific, pretty much the same, maybe weakly stronger out of the east over the Central Pacific. The far West Pacific, pretty much neutral. So no sign of the active phase, no sign of the inactive phase, just a dead neutral pattern, at least for the 5-day period. So like 2.5 days before now and actually over the previous 5 days. So this would roughly be 2.5 days ago. So what is the forecast for the trades over the next couple of weeks? This is from the GFS model, 2-week forecast down here below. This is what past performance is here, but this is for the whole planet. The blues, easterly anomalies, trade stronger than normal. The reds, westerly anomalies. The westerly anomalies are again associated with the active phase of the MJO, and the reds are what we're looking for, and we want to see them push into the Pacific. All right, so the date, remember, this is the whole Planet 1 chart. The date line's right here. Far West Pacific starts at 125 east, so right here. This is an interesting pattern, and really the area that matters is the West Pacific, just a hair bit east of the date line. From the entrance to the West Pacific over the date line, the jet stream would be flowing from west to east over this area. If it picks up its momentum somewhere in here, that will help feed it almost the whole way across the Pacific. California's at 120 west. At that point, you kind of want the jet stream to veer off to the north a little bit, at least this time of year, to give you kind of a weak wind regime for California. Now, so where have we been? We've been in this pattern with a very weak MJO, biased weakly towards the inactive phase of the MJ. You see easterly anomalies for the most part here over the dateline region, and no meaningful westerly anomalies. And then all of a sudden, here we come October. We're getting into fall, and that's typically when the MJO wakes up. In the summer months, it doesn't do a whole lot. But when you get into the fall, it really wakes up. And here we go, boom, big blob of easterly anomalies. You go, well, that's not good. That's the inactive phase of the MJO. True, but also notice over the maritime continent, westerly anomalies building. And these easterly anomalies, well, that's 10 days from now, they die, and about October 24th or 25th, the westerly anomalies start building into the West Pacific. And as we get to right about Halloween, they're filling half the Kelvin wave generation area. This right here, I'd say, would be a good sweet spot for the beginning of what I'd call a legit fall pattern. That said, here we are today. The jet stream doing pretty good, producing a series of storms. It's picking up momentum from the low pressure, from the active phase of the MJO over the maritime continent. But the more the active phase moves into the West Pacific, the more that momentum carries off to the east, the more it will feed storm development into the Gulf of Alaska, and then start pushing our swell angle more towards a westerly direction for Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast versus that extreme north angle that we're getting right now. Another MJO forecast, but this is concerning cloud cover. If you have the active phase of the MJO, it's taking warm, moist air, lifting it aloft. That warm, moist air condenses it as it hits the upper atmosphere, producing clouds, and that's what this chart depicts. Outgoing long-wave radiation. Blue, negative anomalies, more clouds than normal. The oranges and reds, clear skies, falling air, the inactive phase of the MJO. South America, Central America, New Guinea, EQ, the equator, dateline right there. So this is showing inactive phase over the West Pacific, just like what we're seeing in the other chart where it was showing easterly anomalies. So inactive phase as the active phase builds over the maritime continent. That holds for 5 days, but even 5 days out, it supposedly starts fading. 10 days from now, active phase starts moving into the West Pacific. 2 weeks from now, we're in a full-blown normal active phase of the MJO. Now, this is per the CA model, a statistic model, okay? The dynamic model, the GEFS model, hey, look at this. Basically saying the exact same thing. Active phase 2 weeks from now. We'll just take a look. That statistic model, dynamic model, this looks good. When you have multiple models that are all talking the same language and with the same outcome, that increases our confidence that this outcome might actually occur. phase diagrams for the same two models, statistic model, dynamic model. How do you read this? Well, this just tracks where the active phase of the MJO is and how strong it is. So the MJO moves from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States. Remember, it's on the equator. Over the Atlantic to Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. Heavy dot is where the active phase is. If you're in near or in this circle, it's considered extremely weak. Hey, it's actually moved away from the circle for the first time in months. So a modest active phase of the MJO in the Indian Ocean per 1, 2, 3 different flavors of the statistic model. The active phase of the MJO is to be moving into the West Pacific 14 days from now and split anywhere from very weak to moderately strong. The dynamic model basically saying the same thing, just about ready to move in. It's just about ready to move into the West Pacific and at modest status. So, there is some hope. Here's the CFS model for zonal wind anomalies at the 850 millibar level. This is the forecast. Here's where we've been. The date line runs right up the middle. West Pacific starts at 125 east, so right here. You can see, and this has the MJO on it, a black contour. You can see the MJO since at least July in this chart, really nothing. And all of a sudden, boom, here we go. It wakes up. We have a legitimate, solid, inactive phase of the MJO in control of the West Pacific right now. Forecast making it past the date line on about the October 25th, something like that, and then moving beyond that. There's your pocket of easterly anomalies. So for this week to 7 days, I wouldn't be super expecting of storm development. But then here comes your active phase, equally as strong. Notice westerly anomalies moving into the West Pacific, making it halfway to the date line. This would be the beginning of a target for storm development. And then we look at the CFS model going out 3 months. Past performance down here, the forecast up here. Notice the date line runs right up the middle, far West Pacific, right about here, 125 west. Notice the preponderance of easterly anomalies over the dateline region, West Pacific, consistent with a La Nina pattern, okay? But then we get here, starting not even a week from now, westerly anomalies start reaching right at the hairy edge of the West Pacific, and about in 9 or 10 days from now, west anomalies build. Eastern anomalies, though, before that, this would probably be the inactive phase, the MJO. Here comes our active phase. But after that, notice what was blues all over the dateline region now turns to yellows. That would be westerly anomalies. That would push us towards a low pressure bias and maybe the end of La Nina. And that's sort of what we're talking about in the title of the video. There is hope. There is some sort of a change. We think it's coming. The models have been suggesting it for a while, and now we're starting to see concrete evidence, and there's a lot more than just this happening. We'll show you in a minute. Let's overlay the MJO here. Not unexpectedly, the dotted contour, the inactive phase of the MJO over the date line till November 10th or something like that. So a little bit longer than what we like. That's almost 2 weeks. But the active phase of the MJO pushing into the West Pacific a week from now, westerly anomalies developing beyond that and pushing the whole way to the date line and then beyond after that. In fact, westerly anomalies taking over the bulk of the Pacific as we get to the 14th of December. And after that, even with high inactive phases of the MJO behind that, westerly anomalies taking control. Now, do I believe it? I don't know. The models have been hitting at this for a while. It never seems to happen. I think the next week or two are going to be pretty critical. If we have legitimate MJO activity in control, then that would be the forcing factor for the development of westerly anomalies. We'll have to see, but there's some stuff going on in the ocean that suggests that maybe this is in fact going to be true. Let's overlay, where are we? The low pass filter. Here we go. All right, so the dark contour, low pressure bias. Consider that sort of like the El Nino indicator. The dotted contour, the high pressure bias, La Nina. So we're in kind of a dual mode right now. The split line between the two of them right there is at like right at 150 east, so halfway across the Kelvin wave generation area, halfway to the date line. So we're in this dual mode, low pressure bias, westerly anomalies, about ready to build over half the Pacific with high pressure over the other half. The jet stream pushing over top, it pushes over this low pressure bias, picks up momentum, and then pushes into the West Pacific. But that really won't get started for about the next week and a half after this inactive phase of the MJO starts fading. But also notice the low pressure bias easing further and further off to the east. I've seen it vacillating anywhere from the date line to halfway to the date line by mid-January. But of more interest is this high pressure bias. Well, one, it builds the two contours, but then it also quickly fades and retrogrades as by the time you're getting into Christmas, it's all but over. And this, right as the start of the official start of winter at December 21st starts setting up, this would be a great development if it were to happen. Right now, I'm going to consider it a tease, but it's a tease that is persisting on the models, and we have other data to suggest that maybe there are fundamental underpinnings for it occurring. So let's talk about those underpinnings. First off, we're going to look again at the TAO data buoy array. There's 5-day temperatures, East Pacific here, West Pacific here. These lines here, these are the anchor lines on the buoys. The X's sensors on the anchor lines. Use the sensors and a model to fill in the gaps in between to monitor the balance of warm and cold water in the Pacific. Warm water in the West Pacific driven by stronger than normal trades, and you end up with cooler water in the East Pacific. That's the pattern of La Nina. But we've been monitoring where these isotherms are, and when they start moving off to the east, that tells you that the trade winds are weakening. Trade winds blowing from east to west. If they weaken, the warm water it's being held at bay in the West Pacific by those trades. If the trades weaken, the isotherms start moving. And that's exactly what's happening. The 29-degree isotherm was at 173 last week. It's at 175 now. The 28-degree isotherm was at 172 west or 173. It's at 170 now. The 24-degree isotherm was back at 130 about a week ago. It's at 122 now. Not huge shifts, and a couple of days, yeah, the winds vary, so not to be too excited yet. But let's keep going. The subsurface temperature anomalies, the difference from this time of year. And here's where we see something a little bit more interesting. One, this cool pool. Now we're down 100 meters, 200 meters, East Pacific here, West Pacific here. The dividing line between the warmer waters and the colder waters has definitely moved off to the east. The cool pool, which was centered at like 140, like out here for weeks, then I think last week it was at 120. Now it's at 110. That suggests the trades are weakening and the water temperatures, and you see it right here, are warming. This was colder, I think, even last week. So this senses that there is some warming, slackening of trades occurring for the moment. Now we know the inactive phase is going to set up for a short blast of easterly anomalies. It might reverse some of this, but after that, if westerly anomalies come, and if the momentum is already moving towards a warming pattern, maybe we'll get some motion in the right direction. The Pentad data, it's back October 15th, and it updates every 5 days. It uses satellite data to amplify some of this. It's still showing that cool pool, but it does show the warm anomalies. They've been locked at like 165 west or 160. Look at this. They're creeping the whole way to 140 now, suggesting, again, weakness in the cool pool, and I wouldn't say building of the warm pool, but some momentum in the warm pool pushing off to the east. Sea level anomaly data also is showing this. So here's the equator, here's the date line. This is Chile, Peru, Ecuador, the Galapagos, New Guinea here. This is not showing temperatures. It is the height of the ocean, the sphere of the ocean, if you will. Strip away wind waves, waves, tides. And is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? Why does that matter? Well, if it's lower than normal, if you have cold water depth, cold water contracts, you get a little, it'll displace water down on the ocean surface. And you see it here, minus 10 centimeters, okay, minus 5 centimeters. So clearly still a La Nina type negative anomaly pattern. With warm water in the west, warm water expands, displaces water upward, and you get your 10 centimeter upward anomalies here. But the volume or the aerial coverage of these 10 centimeter anomalies, negative 10 centimeter anomalies, has shrunk significantly from the last reporting period and is shrinking. Even the minus 5 centimeter, it was out here at one point. It's shrinking, suggesting, again, that trades are weakening in this area, at least for the moment. Upper ocean heat anomalies, this is the pattern over a year, okay? Last year here on the, let's say October 24th, and here we are. October 2024, October 2025. The La Nina pattern, this is the West Pacific, this is the East Pacific, this is the upper 300 meters of the ocean. In the East Pacific, cold water, our Modoki La Nina from last year, all the warm water balled up in the West Pacific, driven by stronger than normal trades. This was Modoki La Nina. Things really broke up here from April into about July, almost a neutral pattern. Then the trades picked up again. You got the negative anomalies. Here we are today. You see the warm water trying to push off to the east. We want to see this darker shade of blue starting to fade. That would be a real indicator that we're moving in the right direction. See these like where warm water pushes east. We want to see this push way off into here and then keep holding. This is the hope of where we're going to be maybe a couple weeks from now. Sea surface temperature anomalies, South America, Central America, New Guinea, the equator there, dateline there. You see the blues, colder than normal temperatures, but warming here over the Galapagos and off Ecuador, and the extent of the deep cools here, not nearly as bad as last week or the week before that, again suggesting some modification, some slackening of the trades in this area. The 7-day trend, you can see it plain as day, significant warming from Ecuador out over the Galapagos out to about 110 west. And then after that, kind of a mixed pattern. Definitely trades fading in this area. Alternate sea surface temperature anomaly chart. This just uses a global average temperature and then compares every grid square with that average. Still showing clearly a La Nina pattern, but even here, you see a little bit of warming right there. We're kind of picking at nits on the back of a dog for the moment, but it looks like there is some movement in the right direction. Raw data, CDAS data for the Nino 1.2 region, sea surface temperature anomaly data. This is right there by the Galapagos in Ecuador. Temperatures today, 1 degree, 1 and 71 thousandths of a degree below normal. Pretty much steady for the past week. So no clear change here. And in the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region, temperatures holding at 943 thousandths of a degree below zero, if you will. Neutral is half a degree above to half a degree below. So from half a degree to 1 degree is considered weak La Nina, and that's right where we are for the moment. Right here, the sea surface temperature anomaly, the official reading, that last bit of data at 900 thousandths of a degree below normal was raw data. This goes back a week. This is corrected from the 8th of October. We went from half a degree below normal to just 0.3 of a degree below normal. So according to the official record, just barely, not even really La Nina, not even Modoki La Nina, but I think it's pretty obvious we're in some flavor of a weak La Nina. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? We are looking at the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Darwin roughly in the maritime continent, Tahiti in the Pacific Ocean. When pressure is lower in Tahiti compared to Darwin, the index goes negative. Well, we're positive today, 7.60. Where have we been the past month? generally positive, but not really strongly so. 30-day average, probably a better way of looking at it. 4.6, plus 4.6, where were we a month ago? Plus 5.42. This is influenced by the MJO. So this sort of suggests that we're in some very weak version of the inactive phase of the MJO, which seems like about where we are. The 90-day average, or El Nino, La Nina indicator, plus 3.51. Where were we a month ago? 3.59. You know, if you're plus 5 or minus 5 on either of these, it's basically neutral. In fact, let's go look at a graph. And it's effectively the same graph I've been showing since April, where here, this is the Bureau of Meteorology from Australia. It says plus 7 to minus 7 is neutral. Since May, we've been just on the bare high side of dead absolute neutral and with no change this month. So the MJO and El Nino, La Nina not really having any influence for the moment, but we know what the forecast charts are saying. We're just kind of betting that they're right. The sea surface temperature forecast for the Nino 3.4 region from the CFS version 2 model for the official El Nino monitoring region. So here we go, October, this is mid-October. Dead, well, officially neutral from half a degree to minus half a degree, right on the hairy edge of neutral. Forecast in November dropping to 0.8 of a degree, back to 0.7 of a degree in December, and after that back officially into neutral territory and theoretically heading up from there. I think the next month or two is crucial, but if we're 1-2 months in officially La Nina territory, that is not a La Nina. Officially, it's got to be 5 consecutive months below half a degree. Now, this is the raw data. The corrected data, even, well, there we go, PDF corrected, even more moderate, saying temperatures only dipping for a moment to 0.75 of a degree and heading up from there. Again, the weakest of weak La Ninas, and then moving officially fully at zero in, late January, early February sort of thing. So the model's definitely showing hope, though northward displaced. The Jetstream and the storm pattern getting active for the bulk of this coming work week, with a series of gales pushing from effectively the dateline into the northwestern Gulf. Maybe the last 1 or 2 dipping a bit further south into the Gulf. Maybe opening up the swell little window a little bit more for Southern California and certainly for Northern California. No significant rainfall or snow forecast. Looking longer term, of course, the ENSO pattern, I mean, it's really, we're hanging on the next week or two. Inactive phase of the MJO, if it sets up strong, I'm not disappointed by that. That means the MJO is waking up. And if it does that, that means that likely the active phase of the MJO will be right behind it. If that happens, that brings us westerly anomalies. And if the jet stream is like, if right now is considered our baseline condition with virtually no MJO in influence over the Pacific, and we're getting a decent storm pattern and surf, if we can get a little bit more active phase and a little bit less inactive phase, I think that will do a lot for helping to feed the storm generation machine. Longer term after that, if we can get through to January or so, it looks very much like we'll be in a, officially the start of winter is December 21st. We'll be in a decent situation for January, February, maybe even March and beyond for swell generation, if all this goes as forecast. Rainfall for California, I'm still not holding my breath. We can hope for a miracle. We got a pretty good soaking of rain here in San Francisco Bay Area back about a week ago. More of it would be nice, but it's still very early in the season. Typically, we don't even get our first rainfall somewhere between October 15th and Halloween. So we're basically right on track, if not doing better. I actually looked and saw that the San Francisco Bay Area was at like 600% of normal for normal rainfall for this time of year, which doesn't mean anything because one rainstorm does not make a winter. But for now, cautiously optimistic. I think I'm looking more forward to swell production in the Pacific, and I'm not holding my breath at all for snow and rain. I think most of that's going to be focused up north of the California-Oregon border up in the Pacific Northwest. All right, so things looking reasonably positive right now. If you enjoyed the video, please give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, I think we're like 20 subscribers short of reaching 8,000. Please do that. It'd be greatly appreciated. Comment or question, write it up down below. We'd be happy to respond. If you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. And other than that, we are done for this week. It looks like there's going to be some surf. I plan on going and getting some. Otherwise, we will do this video again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks so much for watching.